This channel is only possible thanks to direct contributions from viewers like Kronos, Karazin Magi, Argus, Milk, Bleed Red, Aria Reed, Christopher Welch, Jacob Sandoval, and you. If you'd like to contribute to making more videos like this possible, you can do so for as little as $1 a month on Patreon, or by buying a t-shirt at the merch store. Thanks a bunch, and I hope you enjoy the show. Before we get into this video, you should know the games we're going to discuss in this two-parter are narratively driven visual novels. The story is the gameplay here, so when I say I'm going to spoil these games, I really mean it. One other thing. Content warnings for both of these titles, especially We Know the Devil. This video and these games cover, among other things, emotional abuse, depression, self-loathing, and a general atmosphere of existing in a world seemingly designed for despair. Despite all of that, there's true love and hope here, too. So much love and hope that even though this first game in particular hurts like hell to even think about in some ways, I don't ever quite want to stop doing it. So much of it that I feel I have to tell you about it now, just to let the feelings out of me. If you're ready for all that, let's dive into... It's wrong to want such a thing, don't you know that? So don't. I still know that much. Stop looking up to me. Don't try to make me feel better. I was hoping you'd say, "Get behind me," or "I rebuke you," like you're supposed to. Won't you let me feel like a real devil for a moment? Let's play a game. Here's how it starts. You're born, you're a baby, and then before you know it, you're a kid just starting to realize you know how to think, that you exist as an entity that can think about what you're thinking about, and consider the feelings it gives you. But before you fully realize that, before the information sinks into your brain and jumpstarts the engines of self-loathing, love, hope, and fear in your young and unprepared mind, awakening the process of cognitively building and assessing a self-aware, coherent identity to engage with society and reality through, you've already learned something more important. You exist in a world you can't possibly fit into. Maybe you didn't even realize that was true at first, because when something terrible that's bigger than the world is bearing down on you, the only reasonable response for a child is to cover their eyes and hope someone saves them before they're trampled and devoured. It's the birthright of the defenseless to at least pretend to feel safe, especially if they're the furthest thing from it. But sooner or later, like waking up from a dream, you realized it. That there was something about you that didn't match the words written on your script. Everyone is born with a script handed down from the world, written by anyone and everyone that happens to exist close enough to hand it to them. It's in the warmth or coldness of a parent, the voice on the school intercom, the smile of a priest. It's the things you're supposed to do or be. It's what's expected of you. It's normal. Even if all they say is, shoot for the sky, you can do anything. Even if all they say is, nobody cares if you live or die, not even me. The world will always tell you to be something, even if that something is nothing at all or everything all at once. But your script doesn't line up. It might not be wrong, but you're all wrong for it. Maybe your thoughts are out of sync and off beat to the rhythm. Maybe you do your best to keep up and seem to do a good job for a while, but suddenly you can't convince yourself to move along anymore, not even to get out of bed, like a puppet with cut strings. Maybe your feelings take you to unmapped territory, to all the places the mental maps of childhood mark as the secret homes of deviant and perverse things, like a dark alley where clowns might lurk. Here they be monsters, you might see the sign say, but what if you find the burning sun a lot less comfortable than that darkness? What if you'd rather stay? Even if it means losing everything, your people, your home, whatever foundation you had that held you up or hurt you while you were too weak to take care of yourself, too small to even get a say. Even if your life was terrible, diving into the dark could still make it worse. But even if it was amazing, diving in might be even better too. Either way, is giving up the people who know your humanity worth it? If it might give you the chance to feel like you're a human yourself? If you get to feel like you're honest? Like you're real? Is that kind of loving yourself worth everyone you've ever known hating you? Is it possible to love yourself enough to survive that kind of rejection? And if it isn't, is just having the feeling for a moment still worth the risk? We Know the Devil is about feeling and thinking about that kind of thing. It's about staring into that sort of dark space, feeling the pull of that temptation, that uncertainty. And it's about trying to make friends with the only other people you know who feel it, see it, taste it like you do. And it's about being scared of them for considering it, for even thinking about it, just like you're scared of you. The game is set in a vaguely defined summer camp for bad kids. The crosses on the characters' uniforms and the way everyone at the camp talks quickly reveals that this is specifically a Christian camp. Given that all three of our protagonists will eventually reveal some degree of interest in queerness and a general discomfort with their moral authorities, though, it's hard not to draw a parallel to Christian conversion camps, meant to enable Christian families to correct quote-unquote problem behaviors in their kids. These most prominently target LGBT behaviors, which might include anything from wanting to kiss another boy to not dressing and acting enough like the stereotypes associated with your assigned birth sex. Growing up very Catholic and very gay, worrying I might get outed and sent to one was sort of a personal boogeyman for me growing up. We know the devil's horror is, in a very real sense, the horror of this kind of setting. But regardless of the exact nature of the camp, our three heroes are tied together by the shared conviction that it is indisputably a camp for bad kids, and that they themselves are only there to be punished. Well, not really. They're actually tied together by their completely arbitrary placement in a close-knit task group the camp counselor calls Group West. But to be fair, they're right. There's not really any fun to be had at the Summer Scouts camp. It's more like boot camp than a chance to socialize with other teens out in nature. Instead of splashing in the lake or learning to climb trees or whatever, the teens here basically have jobs to do out in the hot, mosquito-infested forest. They are to perform these duties while sorted into groups of 3, then we only meet our player characters, Group West, plus a brief meeting with Group South. While the groups are supposed to work together, in Group South opinion, they are the camp's best kids, and they go out of their way to let Group West know it. The best kids in a camp for bad kids, Group West observes in response, are absolutely certain to be the complete worst. This mutual antagonism between the groups is an intentional part of the Summer Scout experience, with the camp itself being designed to promote social exclusion and competition. The camp counselor sets the tone for the game by telling a story through which he implies to each group of 3 that within their own ranks is a straggler, one who's dragging the other 2 down by making problems for themselves and their friends, or maybe just by not trying hard enough. The counselor's story then implies that the correct and moral thing to do with such a third wheel is to cut them loose, leave them behind, or otherwise make them face the consequences of their actions. In this way, he suggests that the camp's moral code is that if someone is struggling or unhappy, it's their own damn fault, and their 2 teammates should blame and punish them for it. This contextualizes the game's only real mechanic. You play as Jupiter, Neptune, and Venus collectively, but the game's story branches based on which 2 characters you choose to pair up for any given scene. Any scene will give you a chance to watch 2 of the 3 talk to each other about the third, the camp, or their lives and opinions. Once you've finished all the scenes, you get an ending focused on the character who was left out of the most. The duties Group West has to perform operate on a kind of magical realism dream logic. It's weird stuff that at first made me wonder if they're in some kind of delusional cult. Their main task on the day of the game, though, is to spend the night in a poorly built and dingy cabin in the woods. They are to wait there, ready for the chance that if they get unlucky, tonight might be the night when they must meet and kill the devil. At first, it's a little unclear how literal this is. The characters themselves aren't even sure he'll show up at all. But then, midway through the game, the teens tune their radios to the station that God, actual God, like from heaven, is apparently broadcasting from all the time. He waxes philosophical about some vague crap that, if you're paying attention, incriminates the teenager that was left out the most, before assuring the trio that the devil is most certainly real, most certainly coming, and most certainly already here. God then immediately complicates the moment by citing an I think fake but I'm not a good enough ex-Christian to know Bible quote. Parables 1:1. The devil is only the shadow of man, cast from the light of God. He says that the meaning of this parable is that there is no devil. Okay, confusing, just like real religion, I guess. Is this immersive gameplay? Anyway, once it's clear that the devil isn't just a metaphor, even if it is also definitely a metaphor for something, I finally realized that the rest of the magical realist elements in the game amounted to a tongue-in-cheek horror take on Sailor Moon. This wasn't particularly subtle in retrospect. Summer Scouts, as in Sailor Scouts, the characters are named after planets. They even complain about how the camp guardians won't let them have a transformation sequence. So, okay, they aren't exactly on the level of Usagi and her pals, but even so it's made pretty clear that whatever powers they get from their vaguely described radios are more than sufficient to kill the devil. It turns out basically anybody can kill the devil pretty easily, as long as they have the will to try, which is exactly what makes it so damning when someone fucks up and lets the devil in. Let's finally talk about the 3 reasons any of this matters: Jupiter, Venus, and Neptune. The 3 members of Group West have different survival strategies for Summer Scout Camp, and exploring the potential tensions and points of connection and mutual empathy between their differences is the ruling theme of the game. Jupiter is good at being okay with anything the authorities ask of her, and succeeding just enough to be approved of but not noticed. She survives mostly by putting in the minimum and pretending she feels nothing but neutrally positive. It's easy to get along if you make yourself easy to get along with. Venus on the surface seems pretty similar, but where Jupiter has a talent for being inoffensively likable, Venus only has a very nice, polite, non-confrontational demeanor he uses to disarm any potential conflict. Disarming only works if he's dealing with authority figures who like his submissive obedience, though. The teacher's pet act just pisses off the other kids, earning him occasional bullying from his rivals in Group South. Neptune is the firebrand rebel, openly and viciously criticizing the arbitrary logic of the camp, the other kids, and most of all the adults that decided how everything should work out here with a razor-sharp comedic wit that keeps the other 2 entertained, if not exactly comfortable. These radically different approaches to the camp would, you would think, obviously lead to vicious conflict between the three, but what actually divides them is more nuanced and tragic. Each of the teens is somewhat openly harboring some deep-seated dissatisfaction with the camp, but the actual nature of that unhappiness is specific to each of them. There's a unique feeling of loneliness or despair that each possess that the other two don't feel as intensely, or find easier to hide or disguise from the world around them. In the end, the teen who's left out from the group the most is given time to stew in these feelings. What were minor instances of being drawn to the devil in the beginning explode into a terrifying demonic manifestation of the teen's psychology, turning them into a monster the other two must strike down. This is not a triumphant event for the heroes, though, just a necessary one. They might have empathy for and even somewhat agree with their fallen friend, but the desires each professes are simply too transgressive and intense to exist in the culture of the camp. If they don't stop them, the rest of the camp, the world, will. Neptune both understands this the best and acts as the clearest example. While she occasionally turns her insightful barbs on her friends, she's much gentler with them than she is with the world around them. Her brutal honesty serves an earnest attempt to get them to wake up to how utterly cruel and unfair the world is to them. Neptune's transgression is her rage and rebellion, pure and simple. She sees the cruel system around her, and especially how it encourages Jupiter and Venus to hide their feelings out of shame and self-hatred, and decides she hates it all, wants to see the whole rotten world burn down and give way to something better. The other two feel the same way, but view facing the lies and hypocrisies head-on as such a losing battle that they choose to bottle up and ignore their feelings instead, trying to survive around them. But Neptune simply can't. Her anger boils and seethes just beneath the surface, manifesting physically as a choking liquid that clogs her lungs as though society was literally suffocating her. Once Neptune becomes the devil, her fury breaks like a dam, unleashing a flood of rage as she tries to force the others to give in to their anger too. After she's brought down, Jupiter and Venus try to talk to her unconscious body, knowing that whether they could talk or not, nothing truly honest would really pass between them and her. Jupiter's transgression is an intense hunger for intimacy and relationships. Longing to touch and be touched, willing to risk hurting and being hurt in the name of closeness, she tries hard to hide what she views as inappropriate thoughts about her two friends. Rarely, her desire breaks loose and manifests as ghostly hands caressing or grabbing at the people around her. The other two feel the same way, with Venus telling her he doesn't mind her desire and Neptune even indulging in making out in the dark of a closet at one point. But Neptune makes it clear she's only okay with going that far in private, and left to her own devices, Jupiter wants a lot more. Venus isn't clear and direct enough about anything to properly convey whether he's merely tolerating Jupiter's feelings or actually wants her back. Once Jupiter becomes the devil, her lust breaks like a storm of hands, trying to drag the other two closer to her. Once she's brought down, the other two tend to her and hold hands, talking about how both of them thought they should have been the devil instead of her, but stopping just shy of digging into why, of getting too close. Venus's transgression is, well, I would describe it as a desire for truth. In my favorite line in the game, Neptune once tells Venus that while he's very kind, he wants something, and until he knows what it is that he wants, every kindness of his will be full of that want. But there turns out to be a good reason for that. Venus is quietly deeply curious about everything from the nature of the camp, to himself, to even the temptation of the devil and what it would be like to fail the camp's black and white morality and succumb to whatever it is he truly desires. In a world that demands the strength of character to self-deny any inappropriate wants, Venus wants to be weak enough to give up. This manifests as lights that flicker at the corner of Venus's eyes from time to time, shimmers of possibility that he admits to desperately wanting to fully see. Once Venus becomes the devil, her truth blazes to life like a sun, bearing her true self for all to see. Venus is here revealed to have been a trans girl all along, still in that early stage of life many trans people describe as egg mode, when one is still unaware that they actually identify with a gender different than the one assigned at birth. The truth of her gender identity is self-evident to the other two girls upon her transformation, as is the reason why Venus kept this part of herself so well hidden, even from herself. Two girls may be in a relationship and choose only to express it in hidden ways at hidden moments, which is exactly what Jupiter and Neptune do in this timeline, choosing to compromise between their honest desires and the practical need for survival. But a quote-unquote boy who knows he's actually a girl has no outlet through which to exist as her genuine self in the black and white world of the conservative camp. To exist as herself at all is in itself transgressive. Once she's brought down, Neptune and Jupiter wait for a forcibly detransitioned Venus to rejoin them, talking about how they'd risk dying to save Venus and each other, even as they knowingly hide their relationship from the rest of the camp. In the end, in any ending where the two succeed of robbing the one of her color and returning her to the world of black and white, nobody leaves entirely fulfilled. But all of this was just the setup. If you balance out the rate of interactions between all three of the teens so that none of them is left out of the scenes more than the others, you get a different ending and a different visitor on the radio. While the team tries to tune into God's station, they're shocked to find the devil coming through with a promise. There's only room for two in his world, but there can be three in hers. The entire camp system, the black and white world built by God, or at least the camp that obeys him, is purposely designed to create the devil and then punish the devil for the crime of existing. That's why the camp counselor encourages the teens to split their groups into pairs of 2 people who then exclude the one that doesn't quite fit in as well. 2 kids working together can always overpower the devil, such as the arithmetic the game lays out. So long as the teens agree to this system and one among their number is left to feel alone, there's never any actual danger of the devil winning the fight and getting out. So the whole event is really just a morbid ritual meant to put both the heroes and the monster through drawn-out psychomagical torture that pits them against each other. They all know this and resent it, but for the first time, they have a way to break the system, a way to truly rebel, and it terrifies them. The world they know is awful, but they know that taking this step would mean waging war on the camp at best, and at worst, if they lost, they would truly be condemned to hell by God's punishment. The game spends a considerable amount of time on the teens' emotional struggle in making a decision, on their fear, their anger at the adult world for forcing this on them, on how deeply they want to make the choice that doesn't make them hurt each other. In the air of possibility, though, Venus finds herself, instantly deciding that she wants to exist as her true gender right now, and isn't willing to hide herself in the identity of boy anymore. Neptune is right there with her, confessing to Jupiter that she hates even existing in her own body, a body that the camp approves of and calls her pretty for, but which has nothing to do with the way she really feels. And together, Neptune and Venus offer Jupiter the connection and love she so desperately desires, convincing her the risk they have to take is worth the reward of sharing each other's honest company even for a moment, whether they win or lose against the youth camp. And they win, not through power, but with empathy. Together, they figure out that Camp South was just as miserable and lonely as they were, encouraging them into setting themselves free as well. And so, calling themselves the Three Eves, the girls begin a cascade of devil birthings throughout the camp and presumably beyond, leaving us to imagine the black and white world of God exploding into one full of vivid, honest colors, coming into being just off screen. A new future waiting for them, a new way of growing up. When I was a kid, that was exactly the kind of hope I needed. The kind of sudden twist of life I couldn't dare to imagine happening for me. It's no surprise then that it hits so hard for me now. No words can sum up We Know the Devil's impact on me better than those of the game itself. This is the new touch, the feeling of fingers pushing painlessly through our skin, the feeling of the muscle and fat, the weight of it, the intention. It's best friends forever. It's a first kiss. It's a love story. It's imaginable, but it doesn't exist anywhere, not any planet. We're a dream. We're becoming people no people have ever been, a human that humans are not. We reach out to each other. I really hope my humble exploration of this masterpiece encouraged you to check it out for yourself. It's under $10 on Steam, last I checked, and visual novels aren't exactly something you need a high-end computer for. If you do, please let me know in the comments. If you already did, I'm curious. Did this game speak to your experience of queerness and growing up like it did for me? Did it teach you something about queer experiences you didn't know up until now? What did you think? And more importantly, how did you feel? I hope I get to hear your answers soon. Check in next time in this two-parter when we talk about We Know the Devil's sequel and thematic sister piece, Heaven Will Be Mine. Till then, keep rising. Huge thanks go out to my patrons for making this video possible. If you want to help support the channel and come join us at our awesome and growing Discord community, feel free to join us for as little as $1 a month. You can also find me on the r/Hiveswap Reddit and Discord. That's all for now, so thank you again, and as always, keep rising.